One died from a drug overdose.
Dr. Bannister noted that Hendrix's lungs were filled with vomit and masses of red wine.
Another was shot on stage by a crazed fan. The other was killed in a crash that was so severe he was flung out of the car from the back seat.
I remember vividly, he kept telling him to slow down. He kept telling him he was going too fast because I was scared.
These rock stars held the world spellbound with their music. However, their deaths would be twice as disastrous. From violent deaths to drug overdoses, here are 20 rock stars who went down in the most dreadful way. Jimi Hendrix. Jimi Hendrix was a superhero who rocked the world with his music. Unfortunately, his untimely demise at the age of 27 was one no one could have seen coming. His death was so tragic that his name would make it to the infamous 27 Club, a list of celebrities who died at age 27.
Out of the blue, he said to the reporter, "I doubt I'll live to be 28 years old."
Vital questions remain unanswered.
With hit albums like Are You Experienced and Electric Ladyland, his songs became the anthems of a generation, and his rendition of The Star-Spangled Banner at Woodstock in 1969 became the symbol of an era. Even as the spotlight on Hendrix grew brighter, he battled with his demons. The pressures of fame, grueling tour schedules, lawsuits, and management disputes took their toll on his health.
Jimmy was depressed and predicting his own death.
I'd asked him would he be going back to Seattle. He said, next time I go to Seattle, it'll be in a pine box.
On September 18, 1970, the world was greeted by tragic news. Although the details of what happened are unclear, Hendrix's partner Monica Danneman claimed she had fallen asleep, only to wake up and find Hendrix in bed breathing, although he was unresponsive. She claimed she called an ambulance at 11:18 a.m. and one arrived at 11:27 a.m. However, the ambulance crew's testimonies contradicted her claims of being present when they arrived.
The Jimi Hendrix experience is over. The acid rock musician died today in a London hospital, apparently from an overdose of drugs.
The only certainty is that Hendrix was found unresponsive the following morning. He had asphyxiated on his own vomit, with barbiturate intoxication cited as the cause. Yet the coroner's open verdict left more questions than answers, fueling speculation and theories that range from accidental overdose to sinister foul play. Jimi Hendrix's death was a profound loss to the world of music, a tragedy that still resonates with fans and artists alike. Elvis Presley.
I think it was Elvis's time to go, so I think he took him.
When the news hit that Elvis Presley had died of a heart attack on August 16, 1977, the world stood still. Fans across the globe were left in disbelief, their hearts shattered by the tragic death of a rock star who had seemed larger than life. The air of mystery that surrounded the circumstances of his demise only intensified the collective grief and speculation. With his first hit single, Heartbreak Hotel, released in 1956, Elvis catapulted into the limelight. Dubbed the King of Rock and Roll, Presley's electrifying performances left audiences screaming for more. However, there were shows where the King appeared disoriented, his speech slurred, and his movements erratic due to drug abuse. Still, on the 16th of August 1977, the world was unprepared for the heart-wrenching news that would soon unfold. Elvis Presley was found unresponsive on the bathroom floor of his beloved Graceland estate, and by the time he was rushed to the hospital, he was dead. The world had lost a superstar and a cultural icon whose influence went beyond music and whose legacy would endure far beyond his years. Kurt Cobain. Known for his rebellious streak, it was little surprise when Kurt Donald Cobain met bassist Chris Novoselic, and together they formed Nirvana in 1987. With the addition of drummer Dave Grohl, the trio was complete, and they were set to take the music world by storm.
Going to therapy, all of us. Sit down with this therapist.
No way, we should just about each other in articles.
With hit songs like Smells Like Teen Spirit, Nirvana tracks became anthems of a disenchanted youth with Cobain as the voice of Generation X. While the meteoric rise of Nirvana brought immense fame and fortune, for Kurt Cobain, it also amplified his health issues with chronic bronchitis and severe stomach pain plaguing him. To ease the pain, he began to take heroin while struggling with depression.
It isn't a specific stomach ailment. It doesn't have a name or anything. I mean, it had been building up for so many years that I was, suicidal. I mean, I just didn't want to live. So I just thought, if I'm gonna die, if I'm gonna kill myself, I should take some drugs, you know?
The world came to a standstill on April 8, 1994, when an electrician discovered the body of Kurt Cobain in the greenhouse of his Seattle home. 27-year-old Cobain had been dead for 3 days. He died from a self-inflicted shotgun wound, and a suicide note was found at the scene, ending with the haunting quote, "It's better to burn out than to fade away." Buddy Holly, Richie Valens, and J.P. Richardson, the Big Bopper. Infamously known as the day the music died, the world of rock and roll was shaken to its core on February 3, 1959, when 3 icons of the era, Buddy Holly, Richie Valens, and J.P. Richardson, known as the Big Bopper, were snatched from the world most tragically. Before that fateful day in February, Buddy Holly, Richie Valens, and J.P. Richardson decided to go on the Winter Dance Party Tour, a tour they believed would bring their music to fans across the Midwest. Little did they know, it would be a tour marred by misfortune. The tour was plagued with challenges, from flu outbreaks to frostbite among the performers. Holly decided to charter a small Beechcraft Bonanza aircraft to take them to their next venue in Moorhead, Minnesota. On the night of February 3rd, the Beechcraft Bonanza carrying Buddy Holly, Richie Valens, and J.P. Richardson took to the skies but faced a blizzard, and that was when tragedy struck. The plane crashed into some fields in Clear Lake, Iowa, leaving no survivors. The news of the crash sent shockwaves through the nation, and the public mourned as the music industry reeled from the loss of 3 of its brightest stars. John Lennon. When you think of assassinations, the target that first comes to mind is a political figure. This is why the world stood still at the tragic death of John Lennon. Famous for forming the Beatles with hits like Love Me Do and She Loves You, Lennon, with his sharp wit and radical views, quickly became a cultural icon.
What kind of a protest did you make? You said, I don't know much about Nigeria.
We did an advertising campaign for peace. Can you understand that?
On the evening of December 8th, 1980, everything changed. Lennon had plans to mix the song Walking on Thin Ice for his wife Yoko Ono's upcoming album. The couple left their apartment in the late afternoon, encountering fans and photographers as they often did. Among the crowd was Mark David Chapman, a 25-year-old man who had flown from Hawaii to New York with a chilling mission.
I pulled the .38 revolver out of my pocket. I went into what's called a combat stance, and I fired at his back 5 steady shots.
Chapman, a fan of the Beatles, was particularly enraged by the singer's infamous remark that the Beatles were more popular than Jesus. Inspired by J.D. Salinger's novel The Catcher in the Rye, Chapman saw Lennon as a phony who preached about peace and love but lived a luxurious life. As the couple passed Chapman, he called out to Lennon and shot multiple times.
Why did you kill John Lennon?
I thought by killing him, I would acquire his fame.
Those around rushed to disarm Chapman, who did not attempt to flee. Instead, he calmly opened his copy of The Catcher in the Rye and began to read until he was apprehended. Lennon, still alive but in critical condition, was placed in a squad car and rushed to Roosevelt Hospital. Unfortunately, he suffered massive blood loss, and his vital organs were irreparably damaged. At 11:15 p.m., John Lennon was pronounced dead, marking the end of one of the most influential musical voices of our time, lost to gun violence, Michael Jackson. There are very few celebrity deaths that have as much impact as that of Michael Jackson. Easily one of the greatest rock stars and king of pop, Michael's talent was evident from the tender age of 5 when he joined. His older brothers in the Jackson 5 even becoming the focal point of the group. However, he would become even more successful when he went solo, making waves with hit songs like Billie Jean, Thriller, and Beat It. His moonwalk became an international dance craze, further cementing his status as the king of pop.
Do you think your father was too strict? Yes. No, he's gonna kill me.
Yet, as Michael's star blazed ever brighter, he had his challenges from a skin condition to allegations of child molestation. Aside from these, some rumors spoke of bankruptcy, with Michael reportedly owing a Beverly Hills pharmacy more than $100,000 in prescription drug debts. June 25, 2009 began with promise as Michael rehearsed for his upcoming This Is It tour at the Staples Center. Due to insomnia, he was administered a series of sedatives by his physician, Dr. Conrad Murray. In the early hours of the morning, Dr. Murray discovered Michael unresponsive. Despite frantic attempts at resuscitation, Michael was declared dead as a result of acute propofol intoxication. The news rippled across the globe with the speed of wildfire, igniting a torrent of grief and disbelief. Michael's death was not just the loss of a superstar, it was the end of an era. Amy Winehouse. When it comes to modern rock, there are very few stars who shone as brightly and faded as tragically as Amy Winehouse. Known for her unique vocal style that transcended genre, Winehouse captured the world's attention with her soulful depth and musical prowess. The release of Back to Black in 2006 marked the height of Amy Winehouse's career, especially with the hit song Rehab, which became an anthem of defiance. Its catchy refrain, "They tried to make me go to rehab, I said, no, no, no," resonating with listeners worldwide. Unfortunately, she struggled with substance abuse. Her performances were erratic, sometimes brilliant, other times heartbreaking. Tragically, on July 23, 2011, Amy Winehouse was found dead in her London home. At just 27 years old, her death was a stark reminder of the toll that addiction and mental health struggles can take. Tom Petty. Tom Petty stood out in the world of rock as the quintessential American musician whose soulful melodies and steadfast presence captivated a global audience. Coming from the sun-baked streets of Gainesville, Florida, and being with a band known as the Heartbreakers, he crafted anthems that became the soundtrack of a generation.
Tom Petty. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you very much. Good to have you here.
Unfortunately, Petty faced personal challenges, including struggles with addiction and a fractured hip. On October 2, 2017, the world was shocked by the news of Tom Petty's death. The Los Angeles County Medical Examiner coroner's report revealed a combination of pain medications, including fentanyl and oxycodone, which led to multi-system organ failure, causing an overdose death. The loss of Tom Petty was felt deeply by fans and fellow musicians alike. His legacy was not just a collection of hit songs, but a body of work that spoke to the human experience. Randy Rhoads.
While some members of the Ozzy Osbourne band slept in their tour bus parked next to the house, the other three buzzed overhead, circling the bus 3 times.
Just like the deaths of the other rock stars on this list, that of Randy Rhoads was very jarring. Born with gifted hands that earned him a place among some of the most prolific guitar legends, Rhoads seemed destined for greatness. When he joined forces with the Prince of Darkness, Ozzy Osbourne, his career skyrocketed, propelling him into the limelight. Sadly, on March 19, 1982, Rhoads, who was wary of flying, was with Andrew Aycock, a bus driver with a pilot's license that had long since expired. In a spur-of-the-moment decision, Aycock took a Beechcraft Bonanza aircraft for an unauthorized joyride, with Rhoads and costume designer Rachel Youngblood on board.
While some members of the Ozzy Osbourne band slept in their tour bus parked next to the house, the other three buzzed overhead, circling the bus 3 times. On the 4th time, they didn't make it.
As the small plane took off from the airstrip near the band's tour bus, Aycock attempted a dangerous maneuver known as buzzing, flying low over the bus. On the 3rd pass, disaster struck. The aircraft clipped the bus, spiraled out of control, and collided with a nearby mansion, erupting into a fiery blaze that extinguished 3 lives in an instant.
After the 4th pass, he tipped the bus on the opposite side and it nosedived into the home.
The crash was so severe that Rhoads could only be identified by his jewelry. In the days that followed, the music world mourned. Tributes poured in, concerts became memorials, and the guitar community grappled with the void left by Rhoads' passing. Keith Relf, the enigmatic frontman of the Yardbirds, had a glowing career only to be taken away from the rock music scene following his death. With Relf at the helm, the Yardbirds dove into the blues, infusing it with a rock edge that was both raw and refined.
Pretty women standing around, they loved you, baby.
The Yardbirds' story, however, was one of both ascent and descent. In July of 1968, the Yardbirds disbanded, leaving behind a legacy that would resonate through rock history. Relf also battled with emphysema and asthma, and friends and collaborators noted a sense of frustration and sadness in Relf.
His son found him lying on the living room floor with his headphones still on. He thought he was just asleep because he'd often worked through the night, you know. It was very sad.
On May 12, 1976, Keith Rife was found lifeless in the basement of his home in Hounslow, London. He had been electrocuted after playing an ungrounded guitar, standing on a gas pipe, a lethal combination that led to his untimely demise. The news sent ripples of disbelief and sorrow across the music world, with the death as tragic as can be. Paul Butterfield. The passing of Paul Butterfield was tragic and heart-rending. Initially trained as a classical flutist under the tutelage of Walfrid Kujala of the Chicago Symphony Orchestra, Butterfield's musical trajectory took an unexpected turn when he decided to venture into a genre of music known as the blues. The formation of the Paul Butterfield Blues Band was a defining moment, not just for Butterfield, but for the blues genre as a whole. The Butterfield Blues Band's appearance at the Newport Folk Festival in July 1965 was a turning point. The band's collaboration collaboration with Bob Dylan for his first live electric performance further solidified their place in music history. In 1971, after the release of Sometimes I Just Feel Like Smilin', the Paul Butterfield Blues Band disbanded. Butterfield also had health issues as he was diagnosed with peritonitis, a severe and painful inflammation of the intestines, which led to multiple surgeries and a significant impact on his well-being. The speculation was that Butterfield turned to heroin to self-medicate, to ease the relentless pain that peritonitis inflicted upon him. This addiction strained his finances and personal relationships. On May 4, 1987, the blues world was shaken by the news of Paul Butterfield's tragic death. At the age of 44, he was found in his North Hollywood apartment, having succumbed to an accidental drug overdose. The coroner's report cited significant levels of morphine, codeine, the tranquilizer Librium, and a trace of alcohol in his system. Yet, even in death, Paul Butterfield's legacy as an influential musician and blues harmonica player remains undiminished. Stevie Ray Vaughan. Stephen Ray Vaughan was one of those rock stars who could very well be described as a musical prodigy. In 1975, he formed a band called Triple Threat, which, after some lineup changes, was renamed Double Trouble. In 1982, Vaughan's life would change forever. His performance caught the eye of David Bowie, and their collaboration would introduce Vaughan's talent to a global audience. However, he had a drug and alcohol addiction.
I knew that I had a problem, but I couldn't stop, and I knew that I couldn't stop. Every time that I had more pressure seemed to be a good excuse for more.
Still, it wouldn't be his addiction that caused his death, but in the early hours of August 27, 1990, Stevie Ray, along with members of Eric Clapton tour Entourage, boarded a helicopter bound for Chicago. The helicopter took off into a dense fog, and just moments later, it crashed into a ski hill within the Alpine Valley Resort. There were no survivors. The news of Vaughan's death sent shockwaves through the music community and beyond. Fans and fellow musicians alike were left reeling from the loss of a man who was not only an extraordinary talent, but also a symbol of hope and redemption. Eddie Cochran Ray. Edward Cochran was some sort of messiah for rebellious teenagers, which was why, although his death was tragic, he achieved iconic status right after. With songs such as 20 Flight Rock, Summertime Blues, and Something Else, he was able to capture teenage frustration and desire in the mid-1950s and early 1960s, setting him apart from other American rock and roll musicians. Unfortunately, on April 16, 1960, this vibrant young personality would be lost to the world. He, his fiancée, and fellow performing artist Gene Vincent had just finished performing at the last of their scheduled concerts at the Bristol Hippodrome and boarded a taxi. At about 11:50 p.m. that night, the driver lost control of the vehicle, which crashed into a concrete lamppost.
I remember vividly, he kept telling him to slow down. He kept telling him he was going too fast because I was scared.
The impact was so severe that Cochran, who was seated in the center of the back seat, was flung out of the vehicle, sustaining a massive traumatic brain injury from blunt force trauma to the skull. His death was a tragic loss to the rock world, and in his honor, Cochran was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 1987. Mike Edwards. The death of a former member of the rock group Electric Light Orchestra, Mike Edward is as bizarre and as tragic as they come. Starting as a banker before venturing into music in 1968, Edwards was often described as a small, shy, broadly smiling classicist in formal attire. With a licentiate of the Royal Academy of Music, L.Ram diploma from the Royal Academy of Music in cello teaching, Edwards shot into the limelight when he joined the Electric Light Orchestra, ELO, in 1972, an English rock and roll band with hit albums like El Dorado, The Symphony, and Face the Music, which earned them a global success. In 1975, he left the ELO and continued to compose and record music. Sadly, Edwards was killed on the A381 road between Harbertonford and Hulwell, near where he lived in Devon, on 3rd of September 2010. A cylindrical hay bale weighing 600 kilograms had rolled down a hillside and collided with the van he was driving, causing his instant death. The world of classical as well as rock music deeply mourned his death, as Edwards wasn't just a musician, but was described by all as a true gentleman who stayed true to his path. Keith Moon.
If you take away all the insanity of Keith Moon and just listen to the drums, he's irreplaceable.
Rock music lovers will testify that Keith John Moon, an English musician, was one of a kind. A drummer for The Who, Keith was easily one of the greatest drummers in the history of rock music. However, that was not the only thing he was known for. Aside from his drumming prowess, Keith Moon was well known in the music industry for his self-destructive behavior. By self-destructive behavior, we mean full-blown alcoholism, drug addiction, and vandalism. Moon was particularly known for destroying properties in his and even his friends' homes. One time, in a limousine on the way to the airport, airport, Moon insisted they return to their hotel, saying, "I forgot something." At the hotel, he ran back to his room, grabbed the television, and threw it out of the window into the swimming pool below. He then jumped back into the limo, saying, "I nearly forgot." He also enjoyed exploding toilets, getting into food fights, and sometimes didn't mind passing out on stage. While this was his way of showing his eccentricity, it revealed a much darker side of the musician.
He wanted attention. He needed that. He wanted that.
In 1978, Moon decided he wanted to be sober, but because he didn't want to be put in a psychiatric hospital, he began to self-medicate, regularly consuming heminevrin, also known as clomethiazole. It was a sedative that he used to alleviate his alcohol withdrawal symptoms. This would prove to be a deadly mistake when he was found dead in his apartment on September 6, 1978.
I went into the bedroom and it was this strange feeling when I came into the bedroom because I couldn't hear him breathing. It was just like a silence that was like lead heavy.
The cause of his death was a clomethiazole, heminevrin, overdose. It was later revealed Moon had 26 undissolved heminevrin tablets still in his stomach when he died. Dimebag Darrell Abbott. Just like with John Lennon, the murder of a musician, especially by a fan, was a rarity, which was why the tragic death of Dimebag Darrell Abbott was just as jarring. With hit records like Far Beyond Driven, Abbott stamped his name on the list of most versatile guitarists, but he would be snatched from the world suddenly and most brutally. On December 8, 2004, Damageplan was performing at the Alrosa Villa nightclub in Columbus, Ohio, when Nathan Gale, a deranged fan, rushed onto the stage and shot Abbott multiple times. The band's head of security, Jeffrey Mayhem Thompson, then tackled Gale, but was fatally shot in the ensuing struggle, as well as 2 other people who attempted to aid Abbott and Thompson. 3 others were wounded at the club before Columbus police officer James Niggemeyer entered the club and shot Gale once in the head, killing him. Abbott was pronounced dead at the scene, and at the age of 38, the world lost one of its greatest guitarists. Kirsty MacColl.
All I want is justice. A life has been taken. It was hardly an accident.
Best known as the writer of They Don't Know, covered by Tracy Ullman, Kirsty Ann MacColl stood out for her amazing folks hits. She was initially married to music producer Steve Lillywhite, and even sang on some of his recordings before they went their separate ways. At the peak of her career, MacColl decided to participate in the presentation of a radio program for the BBC in Cuba in 2001. After the program, MacColl took a holiday in Cozumel, Mexico, with her sons and her boyfriend. On 18th December 2000, she and her sons went diving at the Chancanab Reef, part of the National Marine Park of Cozumel.
Pushing her sons to safety was to be Kirsty's last action. A moment later, the boat hit her, mutilating and killing her in front of her teenage sons.
In a restricted area, it was quite a shock when a powerboat moving at high speed entered the area where MacColl was. According to reports, she saw the boat coming before her sons did. Lewis, age 13 at the time, was not in its path, but Jamie, age 15, was. In a bid to save her son, MacColl pushed Jamie out of the way, but was hit by the powerboat, which ran over her. MacColl died instantly after suffering severe chest and head injuries. Her death made headlines, especially as there are speculations that she was murdered. By whom? That we might never know. Duane Allman. Duane Allman, the leader and driving force behind the Allman Brothers Band, was a well-sought-after musician who worked with established artists like Aretha Franklin, Boz Scaggs, and King Curtis, among others. A prolific guitarist who started playing at 14, Allman solidified his position with commercially successful albums like Idlewild South and Fillmore East. On October 29, 1971, Allman was tragically killed in a motorcycle crash shortly after the release and initial success of At Fillmore East. The band had just taken a break from recording and touring. That was when decided to ride his Harley-Davidson Sportster motorcycle at high speed on Hillcrest Avenue in the western part of Macon, Georgia. As he approached Bartlett Street, a flatbed boom truck stopped suddenly in the intersection, which forced Allman to swerve suddenly. Unfortunately, he struck either the back of the truck or the ball on the crane and was thrown from the motorcycle, which landed on top of him and skidded another 90 feet with him pinned underneath it. By the time it was all over, Allman's internal organs were crushed, and even though he was taken to the hospital alive, he died later from massive internal injuries. Cass Elliot. Ellen Naomi Cohen, popularly known as Mama Cass or Cass Elliot, was a talented American singer known for being a member of the singing group The Mamas and the Papas. However, she went on to record 5 solo albums and had a successful TV career. On July 28, 1974, at 8 p.m., Elliot left a party saying she was tired. Several hours later, she was found dead.
Mama Cass Elliot, the robust, rotund singing star, died today in London. 33 she was. Doctors say Miss Elliot apparently choked on a ham sandwich.
She had died in her sleep in what was ruled an accidental death. The post-mortem result showed that she died as a result of choking on a sandwich while in bed and from inhaling her own vomit. Richard Manuel. Richard George Manuel was a Canadian musician, singer, and songwriter, best known as a pianist and one of 3 lead singers in The Band, a Canadian-American rock band well known for backing Bob Dylan at his 1966 concert. Unfortunately, Manuel struggled with substance abuse and alcoholism, which greatly affected the band's recordings and performance. He was also said to consume 8 bottles of Grand Marnier every day, along with a growing cocaine addiction. On March 4, 1986, a tragedy occurred. After a gig by the band at the Cheek to Cheek Lounge in Winter Park, Florida, he appeared to be in relatively good spirits at the concert, but ominously began thanking other members of the band. At around 3:30 in the morning, Manuel said he needed to get something from his room. Sadly, he hanged himself in the bathroom. His body was discovered the next morning, along with a depleted bottle of liqueur and a small amount of cocaine. Every one of these rock stars' deaths was not just tragic, but also heartrending, leaving a scar in the hearts of those affected. As we come to the end of this video, we're reminded of their lasting impact and legacy. For more fascinating videos like this, click on the cards showing on your screens for more.